Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live dev mentoring session. In these sessions, we help students of the Essential Developer Academy to solve any software development problems they're facing. Today, we're helping our student Bitar. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Also with us, Mike, instructor in the Academy, and Bogdan, instructor in the Academy as well.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
So, Bitar, for how long have you been a software developer?
Well, I started since I was 13. Started programming as a hobby. After that, I went to high school, studied computer science, and after that, to college since 2010. So, professionally, I have around 7 years of working experience as a software engineer, but
Mm-hmm.
there's more years because I started as a hobby. But in iOS development, around 4 years from
4 years
start.
iOS.
Yes,
Nice.
since the late of 2018 started iOS development.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And today we review an interview test project that you sent to a company. Which position was the interview for?
I was applying to senior position. Yeah.
Okay, senior position. Okay, let's look at the requirement first, and then
Okay.
we can discuss the project. So they ask you to create an application that uses the Flickr image search API
Yeah.
and shows the results in a 2-column scrollable view. Okay.
Yeah.
In Swift, users should be able to search images. Okay, so there's a search element. So if you open the app, what should you see? Just a search screen.
Yes.
Okay. Lazy loading only loads what's needed at the time. So if you're loading images, only load the images that you need on screen to save bandwidth. Nice. And it should automatically request more images. So paginate, right? As you scroll, it should paginate and
Yeah.
load more pages. Okay. And it should have a history of past search terms. So if you search something, you should store it, right?
Yes, just for the search terms, I stored this inside the core data.
Okay. So you use core data here.
Okay.
Feel free to use any technologies or third-party libraries that you are comfortable with. Okay, that's rare. Usually companies ask, don't use third-party libraries. Did you use any?
No.
No? Okay. Cool. So feel free to use any technologies. Okay, priorities, deliver a working application. Always in an interview for everyone that is watching this video. Your app should work. A lot of people focus too long in trying to clean up the code and they get stuck in, with architectural decisions and they send a project that doesn't even compile. Like, you're not going to pass the interview like this. It needs to work. Quick solutions are acceptable. So they are open to, just quick and dirty solutions, given the time constraints. Just be ready to discuss your choices. Okay. Focus on clean code and architecture. Okay, quick solution is acceptable, but focus on...
Yes. Okay.
It's a bit contradicting here, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you can do whatever you want, but focus on clean code and architecture. Make good use of this text to demonstrate and show off your coding skills. Okay. When companies say show off, it's pretty much like, don't be afraid of over-engineering to show your skills, I think. Is it? I don't know. Like, show
Yes.
off. There's a bit, there's some contradicting elements here. Okay. Deliverables, you should deliver the source code of the project and a set of instructions if there are any project-specific configurations, if you have any dependencies. It's always important. If your project has any specific configuration they need to do, like, it needs to be clearly defined. But ideally, you should, like, the interviewer should be able to just download your project clone it from a GitHub repository, press Command R, and it should run. If they need to do too many like setups and configuration and install dependencies, maybe it's not going to be good for you. Okay, so we expect the requirements to be delivered within 4 to 6 hours. Okay, that's a bit
Yeah. That's another
short.
Yeah.
Actually, when I implemented this project, I was on holiday, so I was too upset because I didn't pass because I took my holiday free time, my free time to work in this project. So yeah, it took me 3 days actually to finish it, not 6 hours.
Okay, so would you say like working around 8 hours a day, 3 days?
Not 8 hour exactly. It's around 4 5. So
Okay.
because I was on vacation, so but for I delivered it in 3 days. But
Okay, so let's say it took you between 12 to 15 hours to complete.
yes,
Okay.
around that.
It was an investment. You were in holidays, but you were investing in your career, right?
Yeah.
Somehow. Let's look at the positive. Right. So yeah, 4 to 6 hours, like a bit short. You would be using a bunch of libraries. Like, sure, if you use Kingfisher to load the images and use Alamo Fire to load some stuff, and then you put everything together with a bunch of libraries, probably with no tests, you could
Yeah.
do
Yes.
something quick. But I don't think that was the goal when you're trying to pass the interview. Show your skills just by putting a bunch of libraries together. But they were open for it, right? They were open for you to use any third-party dependencies. So
For me, I don't like use any third parties because if there is, I don't want to depend on any outsource libraries because it will be deprecated and you know it's with a lot of issues.
yeah,
With,
we recommend also
party.
to avoid third-party libraries, especially the ones that you don't need, like things that are
Yeah,
small that can become problematic in the future. But there's nothing wrong using libraries, like they can really help you
definitely.
go faster. But at least in your architecture, you create a boundary so your application doesn't depend on it too much. If it depends, the problem is if you depend too much on a library and then it goes
Yeah.
outdated, or there's a problem or a bug or security issue, then it's difficult to get rid of it or replace
Yes,
it.
definitely.
But if you create a good boundary, it's okay to use libraries and get the extra speed of getting a ready solution, right? So there's nothing wrong with using dependencies as long as you know what you're doing and you're separating your application from it. So I think there is a bit of a mismatch here of what they were looking for, the way they work. It looks like they probably internally they use a lot of libraries from what they write here. They use a bunch of libraries and they expect things to be done very quickly with, although they say attention to detail like clean code and tests, it doesn't feel like that's what they do in the day-to-day work from the interview.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a bit of a mismatch of what you're looking for, how you like to work with them. Like there's no wrong. Everyone works the way they like to work, right? You care more about things that maybe they don't care too much about. Because if they're expecting 4 to 6 hours. Okay, so however, please keep in mind that this is not a speed test. Take your time. Okay. So if they ask you to provide how much time it took you to deliver, so if you say I took 12 to 15 hours, maybe like, oh no, you should have used Kingfisher and put a bunch of libraries together and finish quickly, no tests. Let's see, crucial points. Write clean, production ready code. Okay. Write comments. Okay, I don't know if it's because they like to work like this or because they want you to explain your reasoning. Because in interviews, sometimes they ask you to write comments, not because you should write comments, because your code ideally should be as much as possible, like explaining itself. It should be clean enough that you
Yeah.
can understand it. But maybe they were asking you to write comments to just explain, oh, I did this decision here because of that. It's unclear why they say write comments. It could be a
It's hard
mismatch
to
as
write
well.
comment for for stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Write tests. Okay, so they care about tests. Nice. Avoid over engineering. Although they say go and show off your skills. Okay. So try to avoid too many steps to make the application compile. Nice. As we said, like should open the project, Command R, should run the app.
Yeah.
That's the best experience for the interviewer. So when finished, send the GitHub repository to your contact person. Okay, did you send the GitHub repository?
Yeah.
Make sure the link is accessible, public, okay, or private, and you give them access. Also send the assignment as zip. You can also send as a zip file, but make sure you include the commit history. Okay, and this is important. A lot of people, like you ask, please send your link to a Git repository, and someone sends a zip file with no commit history. You know, like it's always good to read the instructions and send exactly what they asked. All right. And what was the feedback you got? Positive aspects. So here's your project. So anyone that is watching this session now, we are live here. If you want to get the project, you can find it here on this link. Okay, so they were happy. Solid principles implementation, clean code, sports landscape and dark mode, no third-party libraries. Okay, so it was a positive. So although they say you could use it, they were happy that you didn't.
Yeah.
You wrote unit tests, nice. No pods, so they see no pods as a benefit, as a positive aspect. Nice. Very smooth scrolling performance when scrolling on first go. Cool. Now the improvement areas. No UI tests. Did you feel the requirement, the need to write UI tests, or you covered enough with unit tests that you?
For me, they didn't mention to write UI test, so I didn't write. Even though I think about it to write actually a UI test, but as I told you, I was during holidays, so just facing rushing times to finish the project. So maybe in the past I should use write UI test. Yeah, even it's not too difficult to write UI test.
I don't know. I personally wouldn't. If someone writes UI tests, I would rather have much more unit tests than UI tests. Because again, we are going to be reviewing this code the way we would review. We are essential developer, right? Mike and Bogdan as well. So would you guys be expecting UI tests in a project like this? Just loading a bunch of images? What kind of UI test do you need there? You can cover everything with unit tests. There are some interactions in some applications that UI tests is pretty welcome, but that's like very few cases, and you can cover most of the things with unit tests. Like you wouldn't need UI tests for a simple application like this. So I don't think that's an improvement area if you covered enough tests with unit tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is like maybe they work, only with UI tests in their everyday operations, and they just don't do unit tests. So, okay, it's nice to submit unit tests, but let's get real. And
Yeah.
in their
Okay.
life, yeah.
If that's how they work, then maybe it's already a mismatch. Like that's why I tell everyone that sends a project, like write the code the way you would like to work with them. Like if you don't think that UI test is the way, like we teach that there are better solutions, and you only resort to UI tests when there's the actual need, in cases that are really necessary, that you cannot cover things properly with unit tests, then you write your code like that, because then if they reject you, at least you're not going to get a job in a position, in a place you will be unhappy, because if they're writing a lot of UI tests, probably their CI will take hours to complete. It's very common to join teams and like they have a very slow delivery pace. Although they finish features in 3-4 hours, it takes them 10 hours to integrate because they take shortcuts in some places. And I'm not saying that they do. I don't know. I don't even know which company this is, but just saying that.
Yeah,
I find it weird, the way I would look at projects. Like I wouldn't expect UI tests for a Flickr API simple app, but they do. So there's a mismatch here as well.
The thing is, at least in my experience, that some teams relying heavily on UI tests don't no, don't think this is a problem. So unless somebody tells you that, I don't know, a 1 hour build plus tests is too much, you don't know. Like you think, well, how else can I do the test? Like, and it's a like
Yes.
a it's not a point of debate. It's just the only thing they know how to do. And they say, oh, but it's much better than manual testing. And that's right. Like instead of having some manual QA do that, you put your app through some UI tests. But we've talked about these many times, like what the downsides of UI tests are. And yeah, it's
Working
like you said.
companies.
Yeah, go ahead.
I work in companies that I just joined them, and they have like a 4 hours CI pipeline, and of course there were flaky tests, and then you just rerun it, or which test failed, and you say that, oh, this test failed. Okay, just ignore it, if like, and then you start ignoring tests. It takes too long, and you lose the benefits of having a test suite. It gets in the way, so people start ignoring errors. They start, stop running. They start doing CI skip to do delivery faster, and that's the problem. And I remember they didn't think it was a problem, and they bought new machines, and maybe they brought it down to 2 hours, and they were extremely happy. It's not only takes 2 hours, and for me it was like, no, it should take like minutes or seconds even. So it's a culture, I think it's the word for it, right? It's like
Exactly.
how they like to work.
And to your point, imagine just imagine this scenario. Like Bitar is, you're used to unit tests more than UI tests, and you go into that team, like you probably won't fit at first,
Yeah.
because they expect you to write UI. Like they say, okay, you're gonna write some unit tests, but we don't have a good unit test coverage and everything. We don't rely on them, so we expect you to write UI test, right? Because that's how we do, like the culture Caio's mentioning. So the I don't think this is a problem with your project. It's something that they care for in their culture, and of course they didn't say it in the requirements, but they were expecting UI tests because that's probably how they work. So you see immediately, it's like Caio said, you write the project in the way you would like to work, and if it's not a good match, then no problem. Right?
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of things that are not said in the test, like requirements they send to you. How to know them, how to know they care about UI tests. So for everyone that is watching here, this is important. How to know what people want if they don't tell you in the test project. You will, before, when you join a company or you're in the process of interviewing, you will research them, you will check their website. They usually have a tech blog. You will see who works there. Do they have blogs? What are they blogging about? What do they care about? If they care about UI tests, their tech blog will be full of how we optimize our UI tests to go from 2 hours to 1 hour, how we do fast UI tests, how we cover, our code base with UI tests. And then, okay, they care about UI tests. So that's how you know the things they don't tell you. Research. And nowadays, like most companies have tech blogs. It's easy to find.
Or if you yeah, I was just gonna say that if you don't find that information publicly, then you can just ask during the interview process, like, okay, can you tell me a bit about your dev process? Like, how do you test? How do you deliver? Like, what's your, maybe what does a regular development day look like? Stuff like that. So then at least I ask this. I'd like to know upfront how they work, and again, if it's a fit or not, because you want to avoid a situation where you're forced into some practices that you don't want to do.
Yes, like
Sure.
for me,
Yes.
if I read a job description and I'm gonna check their tech blog and I see they're crazy about UI tests, my interest in that company would drop a lot. Unless in the interview they say that they need someone that can come there and help them improve their CI/CD process and speed up because they are having issues with UI tests, and they need someone with expertise of replacing UI tests with faster alternatives. Then I'd like, okay, that's my skill. I can get a code base that is completely messy and have slow builds and I can make it better. And they're looking for it. And then it matches my skill set and what I like to do, right? But if you say no, they're happy with it and that's how they work and they expect it to work like that. And if you don't like it, like you already don't even waste your holidays doing a project, right?
Yes. Yes. Actually, I've learned this. I've learned in hard way this lesson actually. So the last month, also applied for senior position for other companies, and I start reading their blog, on the website. So uh, after watching the monitoring session for code interview inside the academy, so I follow this instructions to if you want in applying for a job.
Right.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, really recommend you do it. It will save you time. It will help you focus on the right companies for you, so you can put more energy in the right direction.
yes,
So this one for me, it's like that's not a problem at all. For this kind of application, you really don't need UI tests if you covered enough with unit tests. Then nibs instead of code, which is not the best choice for large teams. Again, culture, right? Inside the company, they don't like nibs or storyboards. They prefer code. If you check their blog, maybe they're talking about this. You see
yes,
maybe they have open source projects that you can look at, and you see that they never use nibs or storyboards. So there's an indication that they don't care about it. But again, it's like maybe if you use everything in code in other company, they would say, "Oh, you should have used storyboards." That's why it's culture, like because it's subjective to the team. Image in collection cell is small. Okay, that's appearance wise. Don't think that should disqualify you. They wouldn't say, "Oh, we're not going to hire him because he put an image in collection cell that is too small." This is just a comment. I don't
yes.
think it's
Just a question. Do you think because I didn't apply UI test and I used NIPS instead of code, it's enough to rejected me? I mean, if we just make some other interview and discuss my solution in eye to eye, face to face, uh, maybe they took that I have some skills and leadership skills because it's a senior position, not junior or mid senior. So it's not this position is not depends just for coding skills, for behavioral skills. So do you think this because I didn't uh, apply UI test or I didn't write the UI in code, it's enough reason? I don't know.
in my personal opinion, no, because I don't care about UI tests in this specific scenario, right? I don't think it's necessary, but maybe for them it's very necessary. Like that's how they work. That's why it's hard to say,
Very
but
hard to
I
say.
don't think so. Especially NIBs, like maybe UI tests, I would have a higher, like bigger weight in their decision, but like instead of code, I think they just put here as a comment, "Hey, we don't like nibs," and they
Okay.
they made it very clear. But maybe the UI test had an impact in that. But because you had unit tests, it's not like if you had like zero tests, I would say, okay, that
Yes.
probably could disqualify you for a senior position. But you didn't do UI tests, but use unit tests at least as an alternative. Did you unit test at least like a view controller, for example, to test like the interaction with like cells and like how you create
Yes.
cells and things. Okay, so like you covered at least some parts, but you need to look at the coverage. What is the coverage in the project?
I think it's 42.
42.
42. I know it's not fully
Yeah,
testable, but
it's low. So it's like if you have only 42% unit tests, you probably should have written some UI tests to kind of cover
yeah,
some from a higher level point if you cannot get that coverage with unit tests, because there's a lag. There's like 58% there's no covered, right? So I
yes,
think that missing coverage they maybe were expecting in UI tests at least. So there is a huge gap. Like more than half of your code is not checked at all by any automation, right? And I think that could be a problem. Yes.
And that's even just the coverage number. We don't know exactly the number of asserts. So
Yes.
there might be
It could be
test there
less.
which is just executed but not asserted. So
Yeah, it could be less then. Yeah, depending on the test. Because like just having like 42 coverage just means that those lines were exercised while running tests. Like, but it doesn't mean that their assertions were good enough. Actually checking for behavior. So usually the number you see here, the actual coverage is less than the number you see. It will depend really on the quality of your assertions, the quality of your test setups, you know, the quality of your design to make sure that it's easy to test.
and
So,
just to
okay.
I want to add something. Like Bitar, I feel you. Like I know how it is to be rejected in interviews, and it's hard to chew. Like you start to think about what's the reason, like, but I don't think you can pinpoint to an exact reason, and you don't have any clue on how these guys think. Like it might be they didn't like you in the live interview, and then they just, I don't know, sent you some feedback. Like there can be so many things. I knew at least once I screwed up an interview because I got into a fight with the interviewer about some Apple
Like
concept,
a
and I was right,
fist
but
fight.
it not really. But we kind of got into a contradiction, and I was right. I wouldn't I wouldn't back
Right.
down. And what did that do to help me? Like they rejected me probably because of that. That's the only explanation I could find. So
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
saying I know, at least for me and probably for you as well, it's hard to take the rejection, but just like it's really hard to know why they did it.
Yes.
Some companies would not give you any feedback. Those guys were decent enough to provide you with some feedback which is in line with the project you sent, so it's not made up, it's pretty accurate. So the best
Yes.
thing to do here is to, I don't know, swallow up the pride and just, I don't know, see what
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can improve. That's it. Like it's hard, but you got to do it.
Yes. Definitely.
What you learn from this experience as well, so it doesn't happen again next time. Because I agree, with Bogdan, like it's you cannot read minds here, so
You need to
yeah.
be careful with what you learn, because maybe you're going to say, oh, what I learned here is that I need to write UI tests. What I learned here is that I should always use code and not nibs. And maybe
That's all.
that's not correct.
Yeah.
For that team, yes. But for others, maybe it's not, right? So you need to
Exactly.
be very careful with what you learn with the interview. If you start tailoring for the feedback you got in the interview, maybe you end up in a team that you're not happy with, right?
Yeah, and what I meant here was specifically, like if you have these questions, ask them. Like, okay, if you're afraid, oh, perhaps it's going to be like the previous one, and should I use nibs? It's like rolling a dice. Like what are you going to do? Nibs, storyboard, programmatically. So yeah, just go ahead proactively and ask them. Hey guys, I can do everything. Like is there something specific that you're looking for
Yes.
to see, right? This sort of thing, or about testing strategies and all that. Yeah,
You usually have a call with them, right? Before the test project, usually have a call with them. Maybe you can start asking as much questions as possible before the test project. Like, what is, as Bogdan said before, like, what is your testing strategy? Like, what is the development process? All of these will start dictating if you want to work there, if it matches what you're looking for, and also how to do the test project more tailored to that company. If you like that team, like, impress them based on what they care about.
Sure.
And also, like, sometimes you did perfect in the interviews, your test was good, but like the position was dropped internally because of some budget issues, and they just need to provide feedback. Oh, we decided to go with another candidate. It's like, no, it's just because they don't want to say, hey, we lost budget, we are going down. No one's going to say that. Like, and this happens a lot. sometimes they open positions just because they want to promote someone internally, and they, by requirements of the company, they need to open a position to see if there's people in the market with better skills before they hire someone, and they have these fake interviews just to have on paper that they did it, and you're just a mock
Yes.
there, like it happens.
Yeah.
But since they provide you feedback, it looks like they really looked at it and went a bit the extra mile. But you actually never know what happened. You never know the decision making behind it. So
Yes.
don't beat yourself with it. Like, let's move on.
Exactly. I think
Yes.
I think productive comes from like, oh, what if I have used nibs instead? Like, no, don't go there. Just-
Like maybe you passed, and then you were unhappy there for the next 5 years of your life.
Yes.
yes.
And you don't know. So there's definitely a team that will reject you because you write UI test and you
Yeah.
write all the UI from code. So you don't know. Like the guy said, you have to ask. You can't make assumptions or like steer it in the other direction in your next interview, because they might be the opposite. So
Yes.
Yes. Definitely.
And if you impress them, like they can even like things that they care about in their culture, just like, okay, we like this person so much that we can, like we can ignore some things here. So focus well on the basics, on the testing strategies, like high coverage, and you have like performance in your code, and there are no bugs, it runs well, it looks nice. So image in collection cell is more like no one would ever discard a candidate because of that. So this is just like ignore it. Like
Yes.
you just pretend it's not here. Core data is pretty overkill for such a small project. So what are you storing in the core data store?
Search terms.
Search terms, what?
Of
Strings,
yes, strings.
an array of strings.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so here I need to agree with them that it's pretty overkill to store an array of strings in core data, because there's no like relationships of objects. It's not like an object graph, right? It's not a complex that you need to do querying, you need to do any advanced like paging with faulting to keep memory low. No, it's just a small list of strings.
So, what do you suggest to use in memory store in memory?
Well, no, in memory, it would not persist across application runs, right? So if you close the app and open again, it would not be there. So you wouldn't meet the requirement they asked. So you can store an array of strings. I don't know, even like if it's a very small array of strings, like what, like 10 strings? Could even be user default,
Actually, uh, I thought about I think about use user default, not core data, but I found maybe they want to show off
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
show
so
off my
that's the contradicting part. Like, okay, I can use user defaults. No, I want to impress them. They told me to show off. So even
yeah,
though it's simple, I'm gonna use core data. So like you, okay,
Yeah.
I see.
because I thought about it actually to use user default, but
Yeah, it's just not one of those areas, because again, like it's very small amount of data, very simple. So yeah, like a simple solution. It needs to be a simple solution,
yes,
rather. Yeah, but I get it,
So non-sensitive, small amounts of data. User default, like because user defaults is stored as a plain text file, like a dictionary. So it's not encrypted. So if it's non-sensitive, like don't store passwords, don't store access tokens in the user defaults, but a list of strings for caching, that's okay. It's not, you're never gonna have thousands of strings, or even thousands of strings will be fine, but like you're never gonna get there with search terms.
yes,
Usually because you usually recycle, you only keep the last 30, the last 10. Because also showing a list of 1,000 stored search terms is not helpful to anyone, right? So usually you store just a few, like 10, 20. It's very small, non-sensitive amounts of data, user defaults. Now, if you're storing larger amount of data that don't need any complexity, like storage, for example, images. You can store images in the file system, so larger amounts of data, but simple. Like an image is just a blob of a binary. You just store it in the file system, and that's it. It's easy to also delete it. It's efficient. It's not in memory, so you can get it when needed. That's it.
Even I used core data, but my solution it was replaceable. So we just use any kind of storing mechanism. Be- because I applied what I learned from you guys from the course. So the project built in modular way, so you can use any kind of storing mechanism. So I thought maybe if we made some kind interview between me and them to discuss about what I've done, you know.
Right. So maybe if you explain that in the README,
Yes,
because you can see you have a README here, you don't explain well. Is they
yes,
ask you to describe like the decisions you made and everything, use comments. So here it was a perfect place and say, I decided to go
yes,
with core data to show off my skills, but for a simple amount of data, could even use user defaults and to make sure that I have a clean architecture and my application is well designed, I created a boundary that is not coupling my application with core data, which means I can easily replace it with a file system implementation or with user defaults without changing anything in my application. Now you
yes,
explain the problem, you avoided that they calling it overkill, but you didn't explain it. So they open a project, they're like, okay, he needs to store an array of strings and he's using core data. Maybe he doesn't know how to make decisions just because you didn't explain it. You do know how to make decisions, but you didn't explain it. So they
yes,
made an assumption and their assumption was wrong. To avoid the interviewers making wrong assumptions, be upfront about things. Always explain your reasoning. Because even if you're right, but they don't understand what you did, you're wrong.
yes, yes, definitely.
And you can explain. If they ask, like, okay, how would you decide? User defaults, no sensitive small amounts of data. File system, larger amounts of data, but simple data that no queries. Like you can store maybe some JSON files, CSV files. Now, when you need a database like core data realm, SQLite is when you have more complex object graphs. They have relationships, and you want to do queries, complex queries. Get all the objects that user ID is 2, limit by 10 objects, the top 10, then you need a
Yes,
more robust solution that you can query. It has relationships, you know, what else here? You can do like paging with faulting, which is much more efficient when you paginate and only getting the data in memory that you need. But this is very complex for just an array of strings. So to show off, no problem using core data, but you should have explained that. That would be best. And also explain you have a good architecture. You can replace it easily. You created a boundary there, like what use a
yes.
protocol, right? So yeah, explain it. That would be best. Unless no images are fetched offline. I didn't see this in the requirement. And what does it mean to fetch an image offline?
I think caching, maybe applying
Fetch.
some caching mechanism, but in memory, not stored offline.
Okay, it's just a weird. I would like cached to show offline. Okay. Yeah, but here it could even be like maybe an in-memory caching, not load the images every time you scroll, right? You could
Yes,
have an in-memory caching that would work offline, but if you close the app and open again, it would not be there. But I find
yes,
it weird to have caching images in a Flickr app because Flickr API never returns the same results. Every time you query
yes,
something, you get a completely different list.
yes,
So why would you cache something that is only going to be shown once? The only reason is to prevent making too many requests as you're scrolling in the same uh, search term. And doing an in-memory caching in this case is just fine. In-memory caching could be a solution here, but I don't know if they meant like they actually wanted to cache in the file system to be able to use it when we reopen the app.
Uh, I thought to store it in core data actually, but I as you mentioned, it's not Flickr not doesn't return the same result of data every time. So I didn't store it in core data, but I have this idea to store it in memory, but I didn't. I didn't.
So this is important.
Yes.
You said, I thought about it. Everything
Yeah.
you think about during the session, you're going to write down and put in the README. You made a lot of decisions that they don't know about. They were good
Yes.
decisions based on informed, they were informed decisions. So everything you think about, you will write down. You're going to say, I thought about caching the images on core data as well, but I noticed that the Flickr API always returns different images, so there is no point in caching something that's going to be shown once. Another solution would be to just keep it in memory to avoid reloading the images as I scroll. But I didn't implement it because of the requirements and time constraints. But I know that this is a possibility, and this is where I would do it in my architecture. And you explain how you would do it. So I don't need, sometimes they say don't implement more than needed. They didn't ask this, so you shouldn't implement it. But if you think about it, if you thought about it, you should have written down a nice explanation how you would do it. Some nice features I would like to see in this app. You write, things we could do going forward. It's always nice to show that your architecture accommodates change, accommodates new requirements, in the future.
I thought because after submitting the code, the project, there are some coding interview to review my code. So I thought maybe I would discuss my solutions and what my thought to them, but they just rejected me and by email. So that's why. But I learned my lesson. So
Right in the README, so they
yes,
cannot reject your README.
yes. I just made some wrong assumptions.
So I don't agree with these requests they made here as like improvement areas because one, it was not a requested feature, and they say do not implement more than needed because of the requirements. There are interviews that if you implement more than needed, they will say you didn't pass the interview because you implemented more than needed. Because imagine you are at work and you're required to implement something, you implement more than it. So you wasted team time, you wasted the company's time. So it's a filter that you wasted time doing something that was not needed. So this can be in the interview. So it's very conflicting what the improvement areas they're saying with the requirements and the language they used before. It's not aligned. It looks like the person who wrote the requirements is not the person that reviewed it, or the reviewer didn't even read what was the requirements for the project. And this happens as well, This happens sometimes. Who wrote the requirements, it wasn't even the developers. Like a recruiter copied from the internet, pasted there, and then they sent the projects to the developers, and it doesn't match what the developers want, how they work, and what was in the requirements. So this can happen as well. So I don't think it was a problem as well, because I don't think it was needed. But if you thought about it, write it down. So the main feedback was that your code assignment is quite clear and simple, apart from the usage of core data. Okay. Caching is not working when offline. So they were expecting offline caching of the images, although they didn't ask for it. So weird. So the images are not being shown anymore, and the test coverage is quite low with 42%. Well, that's why they probably talked about the UI tests. Okay. Cool. So it was overall positive, just some improvements you could have made that would get to that position. But I still think that maybe there's a mismatch in how they work and how you would like to work. So maybe it was good not to pass.
Yeah.
But we never know. Maybe it would be a good thing. So let's look at the project now. So you send the GitHub link. There's the Git history, 105 commits. Nice. It's very common that people have one commit,
Yeah.
You get a project and say, please send the commit history, and they send, and there's one commit, initial commit, with all the files.
I've tried to work in TDD discipline, so
Nice.
yes.
Down small changes. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, if I'm reviewing this code, it's already a bonus. see the process, small commits, test by test. Very nice. You explained a little bit here. I think you should have spent more time
Yes,
in
yes.
the README here. Cool. So simple. It has one project, the source code production files and test files. That's it. I like it. It's simple. I like the commit history. Nice. So improve the instructions only. Project is clean. Let's look at the setup. One application target, one unit test target, no UI test. Okay, good. If you don't write UI tests, delete that unnecessary target. Nice one. Is the setup clean? App-delegate clean? No messy commented out code. When you create a project, you get a bunch of methods with comments. You clean it up. That's nice. Shows that you go the extra mile. You care. Okay. Is the composition using core data? Okay. Do you have any unused files? Unnecessary things? I don't think so. It looks pretty clean. Okay, so folder structure and project structure is clean. Very nice, simple. One app target, one test target. That's all you need for interviews. No warnings. Let me build. No warnings. Run the tests, Command U. No build errors. Tests are passing. Okay. How long did it take to finish? Was quite fast. Look at this. You never, ever will have this speed with UI tests.
Even I thought to use like a framework to separate the API and the domain layer, but I think it will be complicated. And because you always mention it to in code interview, keep it simple. So just I wanted to in one project.
Yes, it's very important. Keep it simple.
Yes.
Unless they ask for you to
Yes.
create separate modules, show the, if they ask, sure. If they don't, keep it simple. Look how fast those tests are. I really like this.
But
But
still, 42. I
42,
need to.
yeah.
Yes.
But let's say, even if you have 100% coverage, you actually tested everything with unit tests. Let's say it will be 0.1,
Yes.
know? If you have one UI test in your project, it will take at least 1 to 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because it needs to boot a new application, wait for the test, even if the test does nothing, So that's why I prefer unit tests. It scales much better. You have much more control of the environment. That's the preferred choice. That's the base of the pyramid. Like, most of your tests will be unit tests. When really needed, you're gonna write UI tests, but only when needed. In this application, I don't believe it's needed, because you can cover all these functionalities they asked with unit tests. But you should have the coverage. Otherwise,
Yes. Yes,
will
definitely.
not be good enough. Okay, so it's fast. No warnings, no test failures. Now the coverage 42%, so it's missing some things. Now, are the tests? Well, before we look at the test, before we look at the code, what's an important thing? Does the app work? Okay, I can run it. Okay, as we said, we have an empty list when we open. So if I'm reloading, what am I reloading here? If there's nothing on the screen.
Nothing. I think this is a bug.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is the keywords,
Offline.
like
Yes,
bookmarked.
offline
Okay.
keyword.
Okay. Did they send you the design, or you just came up with it?
No, just
It's the thing you could think of.
Okay. Because I would expect to click on search and see the search results here, rather than having to navigate somewhere to see the keywords. But it's about user experience here.
yes.
But yeah, I think that would be the expectation. Like, click on search and it already pre-fills the last 10 searched.
Yes.
terms, right? So this is just a UX detail that could show that you would implement like best practices. Okay. So if I search here for something, what should I search?
Cut. A live cut.
Cat. Okay. Cool. It works.
Yes.
But it's a bit stretched, the image. I think you need to set the right aspect
Yes.
ratio, right? Yeah, I think that was one of the comments, right? The image is small.
Yes.
And yes. But if I'm not wrong, I think the Flickr API returns you kind of the width and height of the image. So you could kind of use a flow layout to do like some nice, like if the image is longer than the other one, it would take more space on the screen, you know?
I couldn't think about it actually, but yes, I think it's improving area. So
Yeah.
So another
because
thing, like,
I was
yeah,
upset because I like UI, especially for animation and working in a UI. So when get comment in to the image is small or not pixel, for me I was a little bit upset about it because I consider myself better in UI and animation stuff like that.
it was a lack of
Yeah.
time, I guess, as well, right? You're trying
Yes.
to rush a little bit
Yes.
on
But it's not
holidays.
excuse. Yes, but it's not excuse. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because sometimes, like, UX matters is part of the impressing them. Sometimes they open, oh, this app is so easy to use. It's so they were happy that the app was smooth, but this attention to detail can add up. But sometimes you get so attached to attention to details that you don't finish the project. You have like only 3
Yes.
days to do it, and you spend so much time on the UX that you never finish the project. It's not building. Doesn't have coverage. I would rather spend more time in the coverage than in the UX.
Definitely.
So photos list view controller. It's a collection view controller. And you have cells. Do you reuse cells? Like things I start looking now, in the code. Like,
Mhm.
okay, you're registering the cell. Where is the data source?
I think at the bottom. Yeah, right there.
Okay, you are reusing cells. Good. And now if you're reusing cells, I always like to check if it's reusing it properly. Like if I'm loading an image and I reuse the cell, will it cancel the previous request? Or is there a chance that we would show the wrong image for a split second?
I think, as I can remember, I didn't apply cancel request.
Okay, this is critical for senior
Yes.
positions. This is something that even for mid-level, sometimes even junior, this is critical.
Yes.
The managing of the cells. For senior, there's no excuse. Like you need to do that. You need to
Definitely.
manage the request lifecycle. Like as you scrolling here, you should cancel requests. Otherwise, you can make too many requests. Also,
Yes.
the request can come in any order. You're going to be showing the wrong image there. So this is critical. Let's see if we can simulate an issue. Yeah, I can see it flickering. Yeah, it changed. It flicked here. It showed the wrong image and then the right. I don't even know if it's the right image, but like the image jumped from one to the other. And this is critical. This is something that can eliminate like an interviewer from the
Yes.
process. So careful with this.
You can review that in the program. It's in the program, by the way.
Yeah, we show you how to do exactly this.
Yes. When I did this project, I think I was in the middle of the program.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
but yeah, you definitely you are right.
So as an exercise, why don't you redo this project? Just for a personal, like,
Yeah.
Yes.
and then you compare, like, is it better now? Does it solve these problems? Like, it would be a nice exercise. And where do you make the requests to load the images?
Inside the image cell, I guess if you go to the photo collection view cell,
Yeah, there, 139.
I inject the image loader.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't even, it's impossible to cancel it.
Yes.
You have to return a cancelable, for example, be able to cancel it, right? And then you store a reference that cancelable, and when the cell is not on screen anymore, you cancel the request. Because then you stop requesting data that you don't need anymore, which was one of the requirements. And for senior positions, this is mandatory. You need to
Yes.
manage resources, data plan, network requests very, very well. Okay, so yeah, this should be cancelable and even not done in the cell. I wouldn't do this in the cell. I'd rather do it in the controller, like in the data source, than in the cell, right?
Last week, also I made home assignment for other company. I applied I've learned from my mistakes and I applied everything. Cancelable, make some cell controller to make the request. So
Okay.
this project is 3 months ago. It's
Okay.
now now I am better programmer.
Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do this mistake again.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's how we learn. We all made these mistakes. I did this mistake. Mike did this mistake. Bogdan did these mistakes.
Actually, guys, you are the only mentor from me because I've learned iOS development by myself.
Oh, okay.
Even in my company, I am the only iOS engineer.
Right.
So that's why I have this silly mistake because no one tells me what's the right or the wrong. Just from you guys, from the essential developer program.
Right. So
Yes.
nice. We're glad to help.
Yeah.
And this is very common. It's very common for developers. It happened to me as well. Working alone a lot, not having like that feedback from someone more senior than you, someone with more experience. Like an apprentice. It's very like for me the best path for developers being an apprentice. Have someone that knows what they're doing, passing you the knowledge. That's the easiest path, the fastest path. So we don't make like critical mistakes. Okay. So you already know how to do it, and it's in the program as well.
Yes.
So we can move on. So let's think of the design here. We have the photos list view controller. We have a VC, and it has dependencies, a view model.
View model.
Okay, and then there's a view model. And the VC uses the view model. And where is the service? In the view model?
Yes, loader, image loader.
All the loaders are here. Okay.
Yes.
We also show in the program how to decouple the view controller in the view model from loaders when
Yes.
sometimes it's helpful to do it. And since you're using also initialize and injection, you can make those things private because can you actually replace them? Why? Private and constant.
Yes.
What's safer? Because it can lead to undefined behavior. If you replace it while there are some images still requests going on, you will have to cancel them. It just complicates the design. Just hide it, make it constant, and that's it. Okay, so all the requests are managed in the view model. So it has a bunch of services. Let's do it like this. Service one.
I wanted to implement
service
MVP using presenter, but I think it was too complicated.
For this project, it doesn't need it. Yeah.
And even for me, it was too complicated. So I need to rewatch the presentation module again to
absolutely
just to get the.
Yeah, just be careful that there we show very advanced solutions for cases where an extra separation is interesting. For a Flickr app, maybe it's too much, but when you have a large application with hundreds of developers working on it, then it becomes interesting, those more advanced solutions.
Yes.
So that's why we also show simple solutions and more advanced solutions, and when you should use one or the other. Because if you go to an interview, when you go to the most advanced solution we show there, it's going to be over engineering. They're going to reject,
Even though I I think MVVM also too complex for this simple app.
Not needed. Yes,
Not needed. MVC it's fine, I think.
could be fine as well. MVVM is also fine. MVC should be fine. Even if you use MVP, it doesn't need to be the super decoupled MVP with adapters. It could be just model view in a presenter, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
just be careful. I remember another mentoring session this week where we were reviewing another test project, and one of the requirements was, or actually one of the acceptance criteria was not using MVC. So some teams are not fans of MVC. Not sure exactly why, but it would be worth finding that out.
Yeah,
if,
for sure.
if
Maybe use
possible.
MVC and it will be a point here, right?
Exactly.
Like used MVC. Okay, so you have operations. Okay, and the cell talks to a service as well, right? Directly.
Yes.
Right. So one thing you need to fix, but I already know, is the aspect ratio, the canceling request as you scroll. Does it work, the pagination? Yes, it is loading.
Yes. I applied the simplest one.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
cool, it works. Nice. And smooth as well, so we're not doing any complicated work in the main thread. That's good as well. That's common that there'll be a lot of work in the main thread and you'll be laggy, so bonus points. Okay. Is there any specific area in the code you want us to look at?
I think we discussed the main stuff, so everything is normal for me. I don't know if
Okay.
you want to see.
I can see that it's using concrete types, right, directly. Maybe you should, since you have protocols, like don't expose details you don't need to.
Yes,
You have a protocol, use the protocol instead,
yes.
right? I wouldn't even call it Flickr. Yeah, maybe Flickr service is fine. Or you could call this on like photo service, more generic, because the protocol is more generic, and the implementation is a remote Flickr photo service, right?
Yes.
Because the implementation is Flickr now, but maybe you're gonna use a different service later, and this is a way of decoupling your application from concrete.
Unfortunately, the result uses the Flickr model object.
So on 16,
As a
Oh,
result,
okay,
so.
yeah.
shouldn't have that.
Well, for simplicity, maybe that's okay, but like if you say I'm creating an architecture that will decouple from services, maybe you would also decouple from Flickr.
Yes. It's just naming. It's just because it's
Yeah.
just.
So Flickr, this is not actual Flickr, right? This could be like a page.
Yeah.
Yes.
Page
Yes.
or
Page.
something like that.
Yeah, this is actually a page, right? And this will be number, like have a page number of pages per page total, and then the photo. So this is part of the pagination, right? So you know where you
Yes.
are. Yeah, just naming, but naming is important, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, and attention to detail there. There is like some inconsistency between how Flickr is spelled with the name
Yeah.
without,
Yes.
yeah. So, I mean, this is important, like especially for the senior positions, people pay attention to these things, so.
Okay. And this is actually Flickr, like this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, attention to detail, typos. Now, this is a name, right? So I don't think it would help, but you can activate the automatic correction. How's it called?
Yeah, the spelling.
Autocorrect. On
Yeah.
Xcode, it works pretty well. It can show you like typos. But it's important, it looks that it's tidy and project is clean.
Yes. I think that's why the main reason that I want to move to other company, because I work alone, so I want to work with at least other guy to just to work in to make some code review for each other.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason that I,
Very important.
So here you should use the services should probably be protocols to decouple from concrete types. Then you have concrete implementations of those services. And in the protocols, try to decouple from the specific implementations. Otherwise, you can only have one implementation, right? If you say
yes,
Flickr, then it's only Flickr. If you're one day you say, hey, let's replace Flickr with Tumblr, with whatever people are using
yes,
now, and then it's not going to work, right?
yes,
It's going to be hard. And if you make these kind of decisions, you explain them. Oh, I separated the view model with a service protocol. There's no leaking implementation details because I want my application to be decoupled from Flickr as much as possible, so we're not coupled with a specific vendor. We can easily replace it. Or if you decide to just go with a concrete type for simplicity, and say, for simplicity, I decided to go with concrete types with Flickr. But if at some point we need to use a different service, I would create a protocol to decouple it and then replace with any services you would need. You would explain your reasoning. That's important in interviews. Explain your decisions. Because maybe some people are not going to like protocol. No, you shouldn't use a protocol. It's a simple project. Just do a concrete type, But some
yes,
teams will say like, no, you should use a protocol. So regardless what you do, 50% of the times you'll be wrong in their eyes. How do you protect against that? Explain your reasoning with alternatives. I did this, but I could also have done that. Boom. It's 50-50 now, 100% on your favor, right? Okay. So I think that's fine. If you explain your reasoning, whatever, if you're using protocol or concrete type, that should be fine. As long as it's testable, as long as you achieve that coverage as well, closer to 100%, that will be better. Decouple views from services. You already have a view model managing this, so maybe that
yes,
shouldn't be necessary, because otherwise every type depends on every type, and then you're not managing dependencies properly. We can start hiding dependencies, at least from the UI. It's much simpler, the UI without those dependencies.
Actually, Kyle, if you can go back to the cell code, I really, I don't know, it's not clear to me what this does, because we have an image data service that it's passed. We discussed that it's probably best not to do this, or not to pass the service to the cell to make a request. But ignoring that, we make an asynchronous load image data on line 17, and then with the result we get, which is data wrapped in success, then we do an add operation, which creates a image download operation. So for me, this is a bit confusing, because I don't understand why we need two requests through different mechanisms. Can you maybe explain this, Bitar, a bit?
Actually, I couldn't remember because I read some blog on Medium and implement what I've read from the blog. I I can't remember actually,
Okay.
No problem. But
but
just
I
note
wanted
this
to make
is
some
yeah.
I wanted to make some synchronous code and use operations to work in different thread.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a part of the code base you cannot explain. Everything else you were very good at explaining. Now imagine the interviewer would also find this weird. And then they would ask you, why did you do this? And you say, I read a blog post and I don't even remember why I did it. So that's bad for a senior position,
but
especially, right?
but for just to work in different threads, so that's the main reason.
Yeah,
That,
But then you
unless
dispatch again thread here, right?
I
so unless I'm wrong, you're downloading twice. So the line 17 will trigger a network call that uses the HTTP client, if we look at the code later maybe, and downloads the content of that URL as a data. And then online, yeah, just if you show that. So that's sufficient. It's pretty standard. And then with that data on, I think it's line 25, then we just create a UI image from it. So that's sufficient. What I'm not getting it, what does the other operation do? That's also downloading from the URL and generating a result where we get the data again. So unless there's something funky here, we're kind of downloading the same image twice through different mechanisms. You see, so it is. I mean, it's not a bug in the UI, but it's definitely wrong to do this.
Yes.
I'd rather see something like this. Also, if it fails, maybe you should have a retry button, but maybe for simplicity,
Yes.
don't need it.
Definitely.
But I would expect something like this, right? You load the image and the data is here, you show in the UI. That's it. I would also expect this callback maybe in the main queue already. You can decorate it like we show in the program. And it should be cancelable, because why we shouldn't be in this cell? Like, okay, Kai, why shouldn't I do requests in the cell? For efficiency.
Yes.
You should cancel a request when the cell is out of screen, for example. And you get these callbacks usually from the delegate or data source of your views. So the cell doesn't have enough information to know when to store, when to cancel, when to stop a request. And it shouldn't have, right? Because the cell can be reused. It can be in the different context now. It's very hard to keep track if the request is in the UI, especially when you are reusing a view. So we're looking for efficiency here. Also, dispatching to the main queue can also lead to race conditions, because this is async. Maybe by the time this completes, the cell was already reused for another cell, but then you're going to complete with the image. You're going to be showing the wrong image.
Yes.
Right? That's why mixing threading and operations and requests in the UI, it's going to be very hard to get right. It's not simple. So you're not just saying to move requests from the cell, because it's in the books. No, because there is a reason. It's important for simplicity and for getting the correct behavior. So eliminate threading as much as possible. Every time you have async call, dispatch queue async, there will be a thread hop, and you can have data races, race conditions. So move this outside in a way that you can cancel the requests. Okay. Anything else here, Bogdan?
No, I think that was the biggest one, and I think somebody reviewing this would notice it's some weird implementation there, and that's a bit unfortunate because you had everything you needed in the what's it called, image data service. That's nice, like decoupled from the HTTP client. Everything is fine with that. So I really don't see a need for going to the operations.
Actually, I faced I struggled a lot in in this operation. So as I can remember, so for me, the most difficult stuff that in building this project, it was this. So it's especially for operation, it's a new topic for me. So I implemented for the first time. So yeah.
And it was not needed, right? So
Yes,
because that's the problem. Like I would tell people, like, be careful reading about a lot of like random Medium blog posts. Like you might be putting information in your head that you don't need. Might be wasting time. It might confuse you, right? Because you were learning something in the academy, and then you read a blog post and tried to mix them, and you got into a situation that was very complex. You spent a lot of time here. You said it was the most complex part,
Yes.
the application, and you didn't get the result you wanted, and there was a lot of time there. So that's why I say follow the steps. Like, try to avoid noise, confusion, It's going to help you focus and be more assertive.
I was as how I can say it. I was young. So now, as I told you, I last week I implemented all the projects using Ansible and handling the thread, dispatching from background to main thread,
Right.
writing decorator. I implementing everything that I've learned from you guys. So yeah, so this is 3 months ago. So now I'm better programmer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I also, like, in the past, got in a lot of trouble with operation queues because I started using them before understanding them fully, and
Yes.
and you just
And
get confused.
I was afraid to to ask me or to explain this because I don't have experience in operation. So good catch.
Have used them, Bogdan, operation
Oh, yeah.
queues and services, and you can do very nice things with them. I remember,
Yeah,
but
but
like the first time I used them, like, it was very hard to get it right with Objective C, right?
Yeah.
so I think it's more of an older API. It's still good for some use cases, but I think some, and I work on some open source project for downloading images and a bunch of other projects that are built around that. So for each image they download, they create an operation like that's keeping a thread open, and they do all the networking on that thread. But that's a pattern which is, like Caio said, a bit older, like maybe better suited for Objective C code. Nowadays with these new APIs like URL session, you don't really need that. Like, you don't need to keep a thread dedicated to an image download. You just do what you do for any other network operation, like you did for, I don't know, hitting the Flickr service. Like, you open a URL session, data task, and whenever that's done, you get the result. Like, you don't need to manage threading and synchronization of that resource. Like, these new APIs are so much easier to use. And yeah, I just don't think you need it. If you need to create something more complex, then yeah, probably you might resort to them. Like, NS operation queue is still valid, but I don't think this is a use case for that, unless you're trying to do something, I don't know, interesting with, I don't know, like avoiding canceling image downloads just because you need to get all the images or something like that. I'm trying to figure a scenario where you would use these downloads even after the cell gets reused, but for simplicity, I think it's
Yes.
so. I'm really glad, because not a lot of people can say they've upgraded their coding skills in 3 months. So
Yeah.
what you're saying right now makes total sense, and it's cool to see, like, yourself looking back at the code you wrote 3 months ago and say, okay, I'm better now. Now I know all these things, and I don't need that, and it's perfect. Like, this is the only way to learn, I think. So
Yes. Definitely.
congrats.
Awesome. I think that's it. There's probably, if we look at the code, we could maybe more things, but I think it's very clear that the feedback they provided, simplifying a lot of things, the core data, maybe just URL user defaults would be better. in this case, but you created a protocol, right? So
Yes.
where is the protocol? Oh, search key.
Search keyword.
Okay, another typo here. That's
Yeah.
important here.
Catch that for sure.
Okay, so you broke down this. It was search keyword star, and you have a core data implementation. But the clients never use the core data directly, right?
Yes.
Which means you can easily replace it with a user default keyword store or a file system keyword store that could all implement this protocol. So that's a point that is good in our architecture, but you didn't explain it. And they thought it was negative. If you explained it, that would be resolved. So the clients, however, they talk to the protocol only, right?
Yes. And everything composable from the same delegate.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, so that's a good point. You should have explained. You maybe win more points with them. Dependency inversion principle. They're depending directly on the concrete type. You create a protocol, we invert the dependency, right? Now the store depends on the client requirements rather than the client depending on the store interface. Cool. So explaining your reasoning will help you a lot in the interviews. The domain, try to decouple from a specific service if you think it's going to be beneficial.
Yes.
Instead of Flickr, it could be just a page. Although it will still mimic pretty much like the Flickr names here, maybe think of a more generic way of, you have two representations, like the Flickr response that then
Yes.
can transform into a generic app response. But maybe we'll overcomplicate for a simple interview project. So for interview project, it's fine, but in a real world project, you probably will not be coupled to a service that you don't control, right? Because they can increase the price or they can just stop existing. You don't want to depend on a service. It can impact your business.
Also here, since we're on this Flickr object or struct, this is belongs better in the API infrastructure because it's tied to the response you're going to get from the Flickr API. So for your domain, I don't think it's that important that I don't know what the page
Yes.
number is and the page size and all these details. Like I think the abstraction you created was a loader that allows loading images, and yeah, that's what you should be getting, photos.
Yes.
So
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, so the advice is like in this test project, it's fine for simplicity to just couple maybe with a concrete type and with the specific details of the API for simplicity. But if you want to create a service abstraction, then it shouldn't leak implementation details. If it doesn't leak implementation details and you're creating models specifically what the app needs, then you can create maybe a domain layer. If not, you're coupling with specific service, then you'll be in the service layer because it's a one-to-one mapping with the response you get, the JSON response you get from the API, right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Now I think that's it for the code. I would just like to have a quick look at the tests. There's a coverage low. I want to see if it's testing interesting things in the application. The configuration of the scene delegate. Okay, simple tests. making sure that when you load the app, it's loading the photo list view controller. That's why you don't need UI tests here. Very simple unit test that can assert that it's loading the right initial configuration. Thus, if you have tests for the photo list view controller, you know that everything is wired correctly. And the test runs in 0.071 seconds. The endpoint URL parsing, okay. Here, I wouldn't do it like this exactly because it's coupling with the order of parameters, right?
Yes.
If you change the order, you break this test.
Yes.
But order doesn't matter in the query here, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you could check one by one, maybe.
Yes.
We show strategies there in the
Yes.
program.
Yes. I
Okay.
remember that, but I didn't when I didn't finish it.
It's fine.
Testing the mapping from JSON to the objects in the app. Okay. Testing for errors. Good. A lot of people skip the error testing, so it's important to test errors. And success as well. Yes. Okay. Cool. Very simple. Easy to understand. No magic. Perfect. HTTP client.
HTTP client.
Okay. Default. Cool. Making sure HTTP client works. Core data. Okay, we're using a in-memory core data, which is
Yes.
pretty fast. Good.
Yes.
Nice one. Maybe nowadays that you have throwing tests, you could use throw so it doesn't crash, because this would crash if there's a problem and stop the test execution. You can just throw here, throw here. If it throws, it's not going to crash.
Yes.
It will just failure. There'll be a normal test failure. So avoid for some wrapping in the test target. Now it's not needed. Okay. So we have some helpers to perform the assertions.
Interrupt for memory.
Okay, so you have an async API, right? Retrieve, you get the
Yes.
completion block. Every time you have testing an async API and you have assertions inside of it, you need to create an expectation. Wait for result. And you need to wait for that expectation. Just short timeout here. And fulfill it here. Which means this will only return, this method will only return after you got a response and the assertions ran. If you put a fulfill here, like again, it may not be ideal because you need to run the assertions before returning this method. So every time there's an async API, you need expectations to make sure it runs. Otherwise, it will not run. Because this will return immediately. This method will return immediately before this block is invoked. And then the test will return and will pass because nothing failed. Let's see. Let's put an XCT fail here. Failed. We also need to pass file and line in the assertions when you use helpers to get better feedback.
Yes.
Okay, so if this test fails, it means that it's working. Oh, the build failed now. Probably something that I changed.
The type of.
Okay. Yeah, I shouldn't be reaching to the dependencies of the view
Yes.
model. I'm just going to undo, but that's another point we talked about. But if I run it in isolation, does it fail? Oh, but it failed here, not here.
Yes.
But even though it failed, it still says it's successful because the test returned before the assertion was executed,
Yes.
which means there were side effects running after the test finished. And that's a test leak. When your test finishes and returns, it shouldn't, all the operations should have finished already. Everything should be clean. Otherwise, it fails when another test is running, and then you have this inconsistent feedback. It says passed, but no, it didn't pass because the assertion was called after the test returned.
Yes.
So this is important to fix. Okay? Always use an expectation when running tests with async APIs. Okay?
Yes, definitely.
Now with async await, this is kind of solved because you need to await, in the test.
Yes.
But when using completion blocks, it's important to wait all of them. None of those assertions are being run. And this is part of the coverage we're talking about. Even though it's 42% coverage, this was not actually being tested, right? Because it was
Yes.
passing even with a failure. So even though there's coverage, the lines were exercised, these assertions were not running. Okay. That's why I usually follow a pattern that we showed there in the program where we capture the result and we assert outside the block, which is a way, like if you have this habit of only doing assertions outside completion blocks, you will never have this issue, right? It's just a discipline way of
Yes.
enforcing that you're not going to have issues. Avoid assertions inside completion blocks. It's a way of guaranteeing you don't have issues. Okay. Passing. Good. In the list for controller, you're testing the delegate cell. Okay, you have a test that checks only for the empty initial state. There are no tests when there is an actual
Yes.
result. So yeah, that's why they were expecting UI tests maybe, because you don't have coverage in unit tests. You could have the coverage in unit tests if you're using your abstractions and maybe creating some stubs. But because you're using the concrete types in the view models, you cannot replace them with stubs, right? Maybe you can subclass, but I think they are final classes, so you cannot subclass. And they are final classes. So since you have protocols, you pass the protocols, and then you can pass maybe stubs.
I don't know why I didn't use protocol. I think this is mistakes. So
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I follow the discipline, follow the architecture law, and I think this is mistakes. This is shouldn't use here.
Yeah, so there's a lot of behavior here
Yes.
in the photo list view controller
Yes.
layer, including the cell loading, the cells like reusing and canceling the images. You can write unit test that says when a cell is reused, the image is canceled to avoid that race condition we shown. And you can find it all in the program as well. So
Yes.
do you feel like you could avoid these mistakes now? Otherwise, I recommend you rewatch the lectures now with this in mind. With all the feedback we gave you now, you can rewatch the lectures and find the answers to all those
Yes.
in there. And then practice, apply again. And if you don't pass, you practice more, you get the feedback, you bring us the project, and then you practice more, and you get to the senior level, you break through. Right now, your position is senior or mid?
For my current company, I think my friends call me senior, consider me senior because I learn by myself, and But for me, I don't think I am a senior because I work alone with no mentor, and it's a small company. So yes, senior needs some leadership skills, some communication skills that stuff that I don't have at the moment.
Right. So another homework, you will read the Lead Developer Essentials book. Have you seen it?
Yes. I'm planning to read it after finishing the mentoring session, but yes, I must read it
Do it.
because
It's gonna
in my
really help
plan
you.
in my plan I have a lot of books to read. One of them iOS unit testing. This book. Now
You have all the unit testing strategies in the program.
yes.
Focus, you know.
Exactly.
If you think that like this leadership is gonna help you as well, this is the next book. Follow the program. You will, if you have the time, you can read other books, but like right now there are some specific skills that you need, right?
Yes,
So
definitely.
focus is important right now. And then you read the books.
I just if there is some uh, book, it's not. It's I think it's a essential book. It's just for. Uh, I need to read it in PDF. If there is some version copies
No,
that I can buy from
there
Amazon,
is there is PDF, EPUB.
I
What is
don't
the other one?
like to.
Mobi.
Yes, I don't like to read it from using tablet or
You want the
mobile.
printed book.
Yes, I wanted printed book. I I feel I'm comfortable reading printed books than
Well, make a
reading.
sacrifice.
Push through
Well,
this one.
Yes,
Push
push through.
through.
Exactly.
Come on.
because yes, if there is some
Not that long.
audiobook, it will be fine. 'Cause, yeah, I will
Yeah.
push
No,
myself.
make a sacrifice. That's it.
Yes, because I am this is my hobby, my second hobby. I read a lot, but all my reading it's a printed version, not electronical version. So I will push myself. So if this book will be help me to the next level, yes, I will more than happy to.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Definitely. But I think what will help you most is just maybe redoing the program, rewatching the program exactly.
yes,
Um, and you already like you can see you learn many things from there. Uh, just make sure you grasp it all because I think that's what's gonna get you the senior positions you're looking for. Usually, at least in my experience, for senior positions, they don't expect that much leadership. And since that's your case where you don't, you're like your one man team, there's no way you can practice these skills in real projects. So I would rather focus on being as best I can with my technical skills. Of course, reading the essential. So I'm not saying don't read the essential developer book. Actually, read it, but I think the focus should be on technical skills mostly. So even the stuff you're gonna get there is very precise and easy to follow. So
I
just
think it will
just
be
focus on this.
unlikely. It's unlikely that you would join a team with a lead position right now. You're still breaking through to that senior level. And I don't think this leadership will be that expected from a senior developer joining a larger team because they probably already have a leadership there, right? So,
yes. Because at the beginning of this year, I rejected from company because I don't have leadership skills. Just
yeah,
the
from one company, right? Or like every company do you give you this feedback because you cannot optimize for every feedback you get. You need to focus. If you get one feedback like you shouldn't use nibs, and then it's like, okay, I should never use nibs, and then someone say, oh, you should more leadership. Okay, I need leadership. Like you need focus. If only one company say leadership, then it's like that's what that company was looking for. They're looking for a leader. A lot of companies are not looking for leaders and senior developers. They're looking for people that can get things done correctly, on time, with quality, you know. And you still need to build those skills at the senior level, and you're still building them. So I don't think, yeah, I think Bogdan is right. You shouldn't focus on the leadership part right now,
yes.
unless you're trying to break into a more leadership position. But you guys think most companies would expect like strong leadership skills from senior developers?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
It can help, definitely will help you, but it shouldn't eliminate you from a bunch of opportunities. I don't think like it would. I don't think the majority of companies will be looking for like very strong leadership skills.
yeah.
I think, at least in my experience, is based on what your CV is saying. So if they're looking for a leader, like a team lead, a technical lead, they're gonna search for that in your past experience, just to make sure you can do the job. So nobody will, or at least I think very few situations where they're gonna get you to an interview and they're gonna check out all your leadership skills, even though you haven't been a lead before. Like giving you the opportunity to do it for them at first job they hire you for. So that's pretty unlikely, in my opinion. So what's easier for your situation is just to be as good as possible with your technical skills, get into a senior position with a company, and when they see how you work and everything, there will be many opportunities probably after you get hired to take a leadership role if that is available with their structure. So I think that's like the way it usually goes. Like if you guys look back at your first leadership roles, I don't think you got hired for them. You got promoted. At
Yes,
least that was the case for me as well. So,
yes,
and
definitely.
that's hard. Like being a good leader is super hard. It's much harder than being a good developer, because there's so many things you need to take into account, like economics and team balance and the personality of each team member you have. So that's super complex. Like I would only focus on that when I mastered, like I have a stable base of my technical skills. And by technical, I don't just refer to coding, but also like designing diagrams, being proficient with explaining a technical solution, having experience with many projects. Like all these things fall into into the portfolio of a senior developer. And then from there, when you say, okay, I'm really good with this, now I can help more people, like I can coordinate more people doing this because I know how to do it. That's when you look into leadership. At least that's how I see it. And take that with a grain of salt, because not everybody is built to be a leader. Like you have to have the right personality, you have to have some skills, some charisma to work with other people. So it's like I've always wondered. I don't want to open this. It's a bigger conversation on what happens with, I don't know, people that are senior developers that get promoted into leadership positions, uh, even though they don't have the skills for it. But that's a different, like maybe topic for another day.
There's a name for this phenomenon that people are promoted until they get to a position where they're incompetent and then they get stuck, right? It happens a lot. Like in every, not just developers, but even like C-level people, and no, and in every level, that it's a thing. Like, like a lot of developers get promoted to manager eventually, and they're terrible managers. They're good developers, you know.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. They're completely different sets of skills, and I think right now we need more the technical, reinforcing the basics, you know, the more intermediary and the advanced. But again, solid foundation with the basics, then you build the intermediary and the advanced.
Yes,
If you try to jump steps and go to advanced, like you still don't understand some basic concepts, it will be harder, you know. You get stuck. So we watch the program, redo the program, practice.
yes.
And
For some videos, I rewatch it a lot.
Yeah, good. Watch it more.
there are
Can't
also like almost hundreds of mentoring sessions you can go through about specific topics, like interviews, a bunch of interview sessions there that will help you.
Yes, definitely.
And
Thank you, thank you.
what I would add here is, since you're working in a one-man team, then just rely, let essential developer be your community. Like talk to people maybe more often, be more involved in the communications on Slack, ask more questions, reply to questions if you think you have something valuable to add. That can be your playground. So because you don't have a team to, I don't know, bounce ideas off, or just, I don't know, try out things, ask opinions about things. You can do this in the community.
Yes.
That's how I would do it. Like it
Yes.
has to suit you as well, but I think that this is a good place to I don't know, match up for the fact that you're the only developer in your team. So
Yes, definitely. I will do it in the future, for sure.
cool.
For sure, you are on the right path. Like we can see in the code that you're, you are on the right path.
Judging like almost less than a year ago that we had our first mentoring session, it's unbelievable the difference. So yeah.
And you said
Improvement.
from 3 months, right? This project is 3 months old, and from 3 months you already learned a lot. Like that wouldn't make a lot of the mistakes there. So fantastic. Keep improving on this rate, and very quickly you will have like big changes in your career.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. All right, thank you for joining us. Long session.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the I made it too. I am slow learners.
No problem. No problem with that. Nice.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awesome, Vitor. Thank you.
See you next time.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone in the chat.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, not that I agree with making the requests on the cell, but can't we cancel requests on prepare to reuse? It may be too late because prepare to reuse is called when it's going to be reused, not before, right? So I don't know if it's enough to cancel the request on time to stop using data plan when not needed anymore, because the cell cannot be reused and the request will carry on. So there are more reliable APIs for that, like the prefetching APIs and the delegate APIs of will appear, will disappear.
I think that was your point during the live, that from the cell level you don't have access to all these methods being called. Like you don't know the state of the entire collection view, prefetching, reusing, like whenever a cell goes off screen, that kind of thing. You don't have access to that information. So you either move that logic, like Caio said, to the view controller, or you start leaking all these details into the cell, because now the view controller has to inform cells about different states and all. It's like it's getting messy. So that's why the cell is not a good place to do that. Like I know some people try to squeeze that into the prepare for use or the other few
Move
methods you
from
have.
subview.
Yeah.
Like when a cell is removed from subview, there's a callback there, but like maybe it was removed for other reasons, like because it's, there's an animation. So you never know what's going on. Don't try to imply what's happening to the table view from the cell point of view. The cell doesn't even have a reference to the table view for a reason. Like you shouldn't be reaching up to the logic above and trying to figure out what's going on. You're going to make your cell much more complicated and probably have bugs because you don't know the internals of UIKit. You don't know when methods are called. That's why UIKit provides delegates data sources and prefetching data sources to tell you this is where you should do it. Like at this point, it's okay to do things. If you try to do it at the cell level, we don't have enough information, so we probably will have bugs there.
Yeah, but that's the problem, because like if you search it on Stack Overflow or Medium articles, you see a lot of solutions that tell you to do it at the cell level. We prepare to reuse and that kind of things. And it's like Caio said, if you don't understand the domain of the problem fully, then it might sound good, but you're actually just making it worse.
So it's important to do in prepare for reuse, like discard anything that can be reloaded, like images, just setting an image view to new, you can already save some memory, instead of holding a reference to a view, to an image. Another one, operations are good if you want to cancel requests, but you don't need operations to cancel requests. For example, URL session already provides data tasks that are cancelable, and they manage their own internal queue. You don't need to be concerned about it. It's very efficient of preventing many requests at the same time. It knows a lot about the internals of the device, resources, cores, and so on. It can be much more efficient in making those decisions.
Yeah, many of the newer APIs have cancel capabilities. So even the new task in async await also is cancelable. So that's no longer a reason. Like we tried to explain earlier, operations are good for longer term processing. Like maybe if you need to do a computation, or I don't know, transform some data, or process an image, apply some filters to an image, that kind of a thing. That's what an operation is good for. Like canceling is no longer a good reason just to stick to these operation or operation queue APIs, because all the other alternatives also have canceling.
Also, operations were good when you had like dependencies between operations. You like only start this request when these 3 operations finished, and you could set this up. It was much harder with other APIs, right? You'd have to have a bunch of state controlling everything. Yes, good advice here. You can turn on spell checker to help catch spelling errors. Absolutely.
You should.
What is the best approach to go about investigating data race issues? Are the signs that look like a smell? Yes. If you're a student in the program, you will see all the recommendations and how to identify smells in code. But if you already have a data race and it's hard to debug, there are a bunch of tools like the thread sanitizers, zombie objects. There's a bunch of things you can do depending on the case to figure out what is the problem. So initially maybe check the thread sanitizer documentation. They have updated it in the new Apple docs. It's quite good.
Bye, y'all.